Racist flight attendant insulted two black sisters. Minutes later, they expose her and get the entire crew fired. But something happened next that left the whole airline in shock. "You apes don't belong here." The flight attendant's voice sliced through the first-class cabin like a whip crack, her perfectly manicured finger jabbing toward 12-year-old Amara and 9-year-old Zuri Morrison. "There's no way children like you can afford these seats. Who did you steal those tickets from?" The words hit the two girls like ice water. Amara felt her little sister's hand grip hers tighter, felt Zuri's whole body go rigid with fear. They stood frozen in the aisle of Flight 2847 from Washington Dulles to Los Angeles, their matching backpacks suddenly feeling heavier, their excitement about their first solo flight evaporating in the face of this woman's contempt. Around them, other first-class passengers looked up from their champagne and pre-flight snacks. Some faces showed discomfort, others curiosity. A few nodded along with the flight attendant's suspicion, as if two brown-skinned children in first class were indeed something that required explanation, investigation, interrogation. "Ma'am, we have our boarding passes right here," Amara said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. She'd been taught to be polite, to speak clearly, to never give anyone a reason to say she was being difficult. Her parents had drilled it into both girls before they left. Be respectful, follow instructions, don't cause trouble. But apparently, just existing in these seats was trouble enough. The flight attendant, her name tag read, Patricia Hendricks, senior flight attendant, snatched the boarding passes from Amara's hand without even looking at them properly. "Everyone stay calm. We have a situation here," she announced loudly to the cabin, like the girls were a bomb threat instead of children trying to get to their grandmother's house. Zuri's eyes filled with tears behind her glasses. At 9 years old, she didn't understand why the nice lady was being so mean. They'd done everything right. Mama had walked them to security, made sure they had their special unaccompanied minor lanyards, and kissed them goodbye 3 times each. Daddy had called from overseas that morning, his voice crackling over a bad connection, telling them to be brave, to take care of each other, to remember they were Morrison girls and Morrison girls could handle anything. But this didn't feel like something they could handle. This felt like standing in front of the whole class when you hadn't done your homework, except they had done their homework, they'd done everything right, and they were still being treated like criminals. "These tickets say first class," Patricia said slowly, as if the girls were too stupid to understand. "Seats 2A and 2B, premium seats. Do you understand how much these cost?" "Our parents bought them," Amara replied, her jaw clenching. "We're traveling alone to see our grandmother for the summer. Everything was arranged. We have all our paperwork." Patricia's lip curled. "Your parents? And what do your parents do that they can afford to send 2 kids first class across the country?" The question dripped with disbelief, with the unspoken assumption that whatever the answer was, it wouldn't be good enough, believable enough, legitimate enough. Now, before you click away thinking this is just another sad story that doesn't concern you, ask yourself something. If you believe children deserve to travel without being accused of theft, if you've ever been questioned about whether you belong somewhere you had every right to be, if you think racism should have no place in our skies or anywhere else, then you need to see what these 2 young girls did next. Because what happened in the next hour would expose not just one flight attendant's bigotry, but an entire crew's complicity in discrimination. Have you or your children ever been treated like you didn't belong in a space you paid for? Tell us in the comments where and when it happened, because your story matters just as much as Amara and Zuri's. And if you believe no child should ever have to prove they're worthy of basic respect, hit that like button and subscribe to Hyper Racism channel. We're exposing the discrimination that happens every single day while people pretend we live in a post-racial society. Patricia held up the boarding passes like evidence at a trial. "I'm going to need to verify these with the gate agent. You 2 will need to wait in the boarding area while we sort this out." "But the door is about to close," Amara said, panic creeping into her voice for the first time. "We'll miss the flight. Our grandmother is expecting us in Los Angeles." "Should have thought about that before you tried to board with fraudulent tickets," Patricia said, already reaching for her radio. Other passengers were pulling out phones now. Some recording. Some texting. Some just watched like this was in-flight entertainment provided for their amusement. And Amara Morrison, 12 years old with her mother's intelligence and her father's spine, made a decision that would change everything. She reached into her backpack and pulled out something that Patricia Hendricks hadn't counted on. Something that was recording every word, every sneer, every moment of this confrontation. Something that would make Patricia wish she'd looked at those boarding passes more carefully. Something that would expose not just her hatred, but the system that had allowed her to practice it for years. But nobody knew that yet. Not Patricia. Not the passengers. Not even little Zuri, who was crying silently now, was trying so hard to be brave like her big sister. They were about to find out. And it would cost Patricia Hendricks everything. Amara held the tablet steady in her hands, its screen showing a cheerful, recording in progress icon that Patricia was too focused on her radio to notice. The device had been a gift from their school for a summer project. Document your travels, they'd been told, create a video diary of your experiences. Amara had started recording the moment they'd boarded, excited to capture every detail of their first solo flight. She'd captured far more than she'd bargained for. The first-class cabin of Flight 2847 was everything the brochures promised. Wide leather seats in cream and navy. Warm lighting that made everything feel expensive. The smell of fresh coffee and warm cookies wafting from the galley. Overhead bins were spacious enough that passengers didn't have to fight for space. This was supposed to be special, a treat their parents had saved for, a way to make the girls' first unaccompanied flight feel less scary and more like an adventure. Instead, it felt like a courtroom where they were guilty until proven innocent. Amara Morrison had always been mature for her age. Teachers called her an old soul. She was the kid who organized study groups, who mediated playground disputes, who could be trusted to walk her little sister home from school every day. At 12, she'd already decided she wanted to be a lawyer like her grandmother, someone who fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves. She'd never imagined she'd need to fight for herself at 30,000 feet. Zuri was different. Softer, more sensitive, the baby of the family who still slept with her stuffed elephant and cried during sad movies. She loved art and animals and believed the best in everyone until they proved otherwise. Right now, pressed against Amara's side, she was learning the painful lesson that not everyone deserved that belief. Their parents, Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison and Major Dr. Sarah Morrison, had met in military service 15 years ago. He was Army, career military, currently deployed to a classified location he couldn't name over the phone. She was an Air Force trauma surgeon who'd saved countless lives in field hospitals from Afghanistan to Germany, currently stationed overseas as well. They'd arranged this summer trip months in advance, coordinating leave schedules and logistics with military precision. The girls would spend 8 weeks with their grandmother in Los Angeles while their parents served their country. It was supposed to be swimming pools and beach trips and learning to surf. It was supposed to be movie nights and grandma's famous peach cobbler and staying up late looking at stars. It wasn't supposed to start like this. Patricia Hendricks had been a flight attendant for Transcontinental Airways for 16 years. She'd started young, attracted by the promise of travel and the glamour of the uniform. Over the years, that glamour had worn thin, replaced by back pain from lifting bags and fake smiles for demanding passengers and a growing bitterness toward people she perceived as not deserving the luxury she served them. She developed patterns over those 16 years. Patterns of who got her best service and who got the bare minimum. Patterns of which passengers she watched closely and which she trusted implicitly. Patterns that had everything to do with skin color and nothing to do with actual behavior. She'd gotten away with it because she was careful. Never quite crossing lines that would get her fired. Always having plausible deniability. I was just following protocol. I thought I saw something suspicious. I was concerned for passenger safety. The words that let discrimination hide behind professionalism. But today, Patricia had gotten sloppy. Maybe it was the long week of back-to-back flights. Maybe it was the passenger in 4C who'd complained about his meal. Maybe it was just that she'd done this so many times without consequence that she'd gotten cocky. Whatever the reason, she'd looked at two well-dressed, polite children with neat braids and bright eyes, and her first thought hadn't been, how can I help these young travelers? It had been, they don't belong here. And she'd said it out loud. In a cabin full of witnesses. to children carrying documentation of every word. Patricia spoke into her radio, her back to the girls, not bothering to lower her voice. Yeah, I've got 2 unaccompanied minors in first class. Black kids. Tickets look hinky. I need you to pull up the reservation and tell me what's really going on here. The gate agent's voice crackled back. Ma'am, if the tickets are scanned at boarding, they're valid. What's the issue? The issue is these aren't the kind of passengers we typically see in first class, Patricia said, and there it was, the quiet part said out loud. I think someone made a mistake, or these kids are trying to pull something. They're 9 and 12, Amara said quietly, her voice shaking but clear. We're not trying to pull anything. We just want to go see our grandma. Patricia turned, irritation flashing across her face. I told you to wait quietly. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder for who? The question came from 3B, a middle-aged black woman in a business suit who'd been watching the entire exchange with growing anger. Those girls showed you their boarding passes. They're wearing unaccompanied minor lanyards. They've been nothing but polite. So what exactly is the problem here? Patricia's face flushed. Ma'am, this is airline business. I need you to stay out of it. I'm a passenger on this airline, and I'm watching you harass children, the woman said, pulling out her phone. That makes it my business. And I'm documenting everything. More phones came out. The cabin was filled with witnesses, with evidence, with people who'd decided that staying silent wasn't an option. But Patricia had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. And she was about to cross more. Fine. You want to make a scene? Patricia's voice went cold. These 2 can sit in economy where they belong. We'll upgrade passengers from the wait list for these seats. Zuri made a small, hurt sound. Amara's grip on the tablet tightened, making sure every word was captured. You can't do that, Amara said. We have assigned seats. We have confirmation numbers. We have. I can do whatever I determine is best for passenger safety and comfort, Patricia interrupted. And right now, I'm determining that you 2 are causing a disturbance and need to be relocated. The woman in 3B stood up. This is discrimination. Plain and simple. And if you try to move these children, I'm calling my attorney the second we land. Actually, I'm calling him now. Patricia's jaw clenched. She was losing control of the situation, and she knew it. But instead of backing down, instead of checking the reservation details more carefully, instead of apologizing for the misunderstanding, she doubled down. Everyone needs to take their seats so we can depart. Including you 2, she pointed at Amara and Zuri. Either sit down in economy or get off my plane. My plane. As if she owned it. As if her authority was absolute. As if these 2 children hadn't just as much right to be there as anyone else. Amara looked at her sister's tear-stained face. Looked at the tablet, still recording. Looked at the passengers watching, some sympathetic, some uncomfortable, some already tweeting about what they were witnessing. And she made a choice. We'll sit, Amara said clearly, in our assigned seats. 2A and 2B. The seats our parents paid for. And if you try to remove us, everyone in this cabin will see exactly what you're doing and why. The challenge hung in the air. Patricia's face went from red to purple. And somewhere in the cockpit, a pilot who'd been listening to this entire exchange picked up his radio. What happened next would determine whether these girls made it to Los Angeles or whether Patricia Hendricks' prejudice would ruin their summer before it even started. The plane sat at the gate, the doors still open, engines still quiet. Time seemed to pause. And then Patricia reached for Amara's arm. Patricia's hand shot toward Amara's arm, fingers ready to grab, to physically remove these children who dared to stand up to her authority. But before she could make contact, a voice boomed from the cockpit doorway. Ms. Hendricks, step away from those passengers immediately. Captain Richard Stevens stood in full uniform, his expression harder than granite. He was a tall man in his 50s, with silver at his temples and 30 years of flying experience that had taught him to spot trouble before it exploded. And this situation was about to explode. Patricia froze, her hands suspended in midair. Captain, I heard everything over the intercom. He cut her off. The entire cockpit crew heard everything. Those girls have valid tickets. They're unaccompanied minors with proper documentation. And you've been harassing them since they boarded. Sit down. Patricia's face drained of color, but she recovered quickly, her voice taking on a defensive edge. Sir, I was following safety protocols. These children seem suspicious. Suspicious. The woman from 3B stood fully now, her voice ringing with righteous fury. They're wearing school backpacks and unaccompanied minor lanyards. They said, please, and thank you. The only suspicious thing here is your behavior. Other passengers murmured agreement. A man in 1A nodded. A young couple in row 4 had their phones out, recording everything. Captain Stevens held up his hand for silence. Girls, I apologize for this treatment. Please take your assigned seats. Ms. Hendricks, return to the galley. We'll discuss this after we're airborne. Patricia's mouth opened to protest, but the captain's expression stopped her cold. She retreated to the galley, her face twisted with humiliation and rage, shooting daggers at Amara and Zuri with her eyes. The girls finally sank into seats 2A and 2B, Amara's legs shaking so badly she could barely walk. Zuri curled into her seat like she was trying to disappear, her stuffed elephant clutched to her chest, her face buried against Amara's shoulder. You were so brave, Amara whispered to her sister. Mama and Daddy would be so proud of you. I want to go home, Zuri whimpered. I don't want to fly anymore. Amara's heart cracked. Her baby sister, who'd been so excited about this adventure, who'd packed and repacked her suitcase 3 times, who'd made a countdown calendar on the refrigerator. Now she was terrified, traumatized by an adult who should have protected them. Have you ever watched a child's innocence shatter in real time? Seen the moment they learn that the world isn't always fair, that some adults abuse their power, that your skin color can make you guilty before you even speak? Tell us in the comments if you've witnessed this heartbreak. The plane finally pushed back from the gate. Captain Stevens made the standard announcements, but his voice was tight, controlled in a way that suggested he was containing anger. As they taxied, Patricia emerged from the galley with beverage service for first class. She handed out champagne and orange juice to the adults, gave activity packs and coloring books to the 2 white children in row 5. When she reached Amara and Zuri, she walked right past them. No drinks. No activity packs. No acknowledgement that they existed. Excuse me, Amara said politely. May we have some juice, please? Patricia turned slowly, her smile cold as ice. First-class beverage service is for paying passengers. I'll bring you something when I get to economy service. If I remember. The insult was clear. She was treating them like they didn't belong, like they were charity cases, like their tickets, their parents' hard-earned money, meant nothing. We are paying passengers, Amara said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. We're sitting in first class. Are you? Patricia's eyebrow arched. Could have fooled me. You don't look like you belong here. You don't act like you've ever been somewhere nice before. Maybe your parents should have spent that money on teaching you manners instead of trying to put you somewhere above your station. The words landed like physical blows. Above your station. As if there were stations, levels, places where certain people belonged and others didn't. As if a child's worth could be measured by their zip code or bank account, or the amount of melanin in their skin. Zuri started crying again, silent tears that broke Amara's heart more than sobs would have. And Amara Morrison, 12 years old with her whole future ahead of her, felt something harden inside her chest. Not hatred, she'd been raised better than that. But determination. Steel-spined, unshakable determination that this woman would not break them, would not make them feel small, would not get away with treating them like they were less than human. My parents, Amara said clearly, loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, are Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison and Major Dr. Sarah Morrison. They serve this country. They save lives. They've earned every penny they spent on these tickets. And they taught us that people like you, people who judge others by their appearance, who abuse their power, who think cruelty makes them important, are exactly the kind of people we need to stand up to. Patricia's face went purple. How dare you speak to me that way? How dare you speak to us the way you have? Amara shot back. We're children. We've been polite. We've followed every rule. And you've treated us like criminals since we stepped on this plane." The cabin had gone silent. Every passenger was watching now, witnessing this 12-year-old girl refusing to be diminished, refusing to accept discrimination as normal, refusing to be quiet. Patricia leaned down, her face inches from Amara's, her voice a venomous whisper. "You think you're special because your parents wear uniforms? You think that makes you better than where you came from? Let me tell you something, little girl. That's enough." Captain Stevens' voice crackled over the intercom. "Miss Hendricks, to the cockpit. Now." Patricia straightened, smoothed her uniform, and walked toward the cockpit with her head high, as if she'd done nothing wrong. But Amara's tablet was still recording. Still capturing every word. Still building a case that would destroy Patricia's career. And what Patricia said next to the captain would be the final nail in her coffin. Patricia disappeared into the cockpit, the door closing behind her with a definitive click. The first-class cabin buzzed with whispered conversations, passengers exchanging looks of disbelief and disgust. The woman from 3B reached across the aisle and squeezed Amara's hand. "You did good, sweetheart," she said softly. "Real good." Amara nodded but couldn't speak. If she opened her mouth, she'd cry, and she'd promised herself she wouldn't give Patricia that satisfaction. Beside her, Zuri had finally stopped trembling, exhaustion replacing fear as she dozed fitfully against her sister's shoulder. 10 minutes passed. 15. The plane leveled off at cruising altitude. Through the cockpit door, raised voices could be heard, Patricia's defensive, sharp, the captain's low and firm. Then silence. When the cockpit door opened again, Patricia's face was blotchy and red. Behind her, Captain Stevens looked grim. A male flight attendant Amara hadn't seen before, his name tag read, Marcus Chen, emerged as well, and he headed straight for the girls. "Amara and Zuri Morrison?" he asked gently, kneeling beside their row so he was at eye level. Amara's heart hammered. Were they in trouble now? Had they made things worse by standing up for themselves? "Yes, sir," she managed. Marcus smiled kindly. "I'm so sorry for what you've experienced today. I want you to know that none of this is your fault, and none of it is acceptable. Captain Stevens has asked me to personally ensure the rest of your flight is comfortable. Can I get you anything? Snacks, drinks, those activity packs you should have received when you boarded." The kindness after so much cruelty made Amara's carefully constructed composure crack. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded. Marcus brought them everything. Juice boxes, cookies, coloring books, playing cards, even the special first-class dessert menu. He treated them like they mattered, like they were valued passengers, like they were just kids who deserved care and attention. Patricia watched from the galley, her arms crossed, her expression venomous. But she stayed back, contained, her power stripped away by the captain's intervention. As Marcus walked away, Amara pulled out her phone, the one her parents had given her strictly for emergencies. Her hands shook as she typed a text to her grandmother's number, the woman who'd be picking them up in Los Angeles in 4 hours. "Grandma, something bad happened on the plane. We're okay, but the flight attendant was really mean to us. She said we didn't belong in first class because we're black. I recorded it all on my tablet for my school project. We'll show you when we land." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. 3,000 miles away in Los Angeles, retired federal judge Eleanor Morrison was having lunch with an old friend when her phone buzzed. She read the text once. Twice. Her face went from warm and relaxed to cold fury in seconds. "I have to go," she told her lunch companion, already standing, already pulling out her wallet to throw cash on the table. "Everything okay?" her friend asked. "No," Eleanor said, her voice tight with barely contained rage. "Someone just made the mistake of targeting my granddaughters." She made it to her car and immediately dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Robert, it's Eleanor. I need a favor. A big one." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Someone on Transcontinental Airways Flight 2847 just racially discriminated against my granddaughters. I need you to make some calls." There was a pause. Then, "Eleanor, you know I'm the chairman of the board for Transcontinental, right? I don't make calls about discrimination complaints. I handle them personally. Give me the details. Eleanor's smile was sharp as a knife. The girls are James and Sarah Morrison's daughters. Your goddaughters, Robert. Someone on your airline just made those babies cry. The silence on the other end of the phone was absolute. Then, very quietly, give me the flight number. I'll have my team pull every piece of documentation, every camera angle, every complaint ever filed against that crew. And Eleanor? Heads are going to roll for this. Back on Flight 2847, Amara had no idea her grandmother had just set in motion a chain of events that would end careers, spark investigations, and make national headlines. She was focused on comforting Zuri, on getting through the next 3 hours, on trying to salvage what was supposed to be an exciting adventure. Patricia returned to the galley after her cockpit meeting, and Amara noticed something different. The other flight attendants, there were 3 total working first class, were giving Patricia a wide berth, whispering when she couldn't hear, exchanging looks that suggested they'd just learned something significant. Marcus approached Patricia with a clipboard, speaking too quietly for passengers to hear, but his body language was clear, official, documented, serious. Patricia's face went from red to white as she read whatever was on that clipboard. She looked up at Amara and Zuri, and for the first time, there was something that might have been fear in her eyes. Because Captain Stevens had just informed her that the girl's emergency contact wasn't just any grandmother. It was Judge Eleanor Morrison, retired from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, with connections that ran deep through legal and political circles. And the girl's parents weren't just any military officers. They were decorated veterans with security clearances and friendships in very high places. And the tablet that the 12-year-old girl was holding? It had been recording since boarding. Patricia Hendricks had just picked the absolute wrong family to discriminate against. And she was about to find out exactly how wrong. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been notified of a situation that will require immediate attention from airline management upon landing. Transcontinental Airways takes all passenger complaints seriously, and appropriate action will be taken. We apologize for any disruption to your flight. Patricia's hand shook as she gripped the galley counter. Because she knew. She knew her 16-year career was over. She knew that the text message Amara had sent had just triggered something she couldn't stop. She knew that landing in Los Angeles was going to be very, very different from anything she'd experienced before. And there was absolutely nothing she could do about it. 2 hours into the flight, the turbulence hit. Not dangerous, but enough to make the seatbelt sign illuminate and trays rattle. Zuri had finally relaxed enough to eat the cookies Marcus had brought, washing them down with apple juice while watching a movie on the seatback screen. That's when the plane jolted. The juice cup tipped, spilling across Zuri's tray table and splashing onto her lap. She gasped, more startled than hurt, as cold liquid soaked through her favorite sundress, the yellow one with sunflowers that Mama had helped her pick out special for the trip. Oh no, Zuri whimpered, looking down at the spreading stain. Amara, I made a mess. It's okay, baby, Amara soothed, already reaching for napkins. It was an accident. The plane bumped. It's not your fault. But Patricia had been watching from the galley. Waiting. Seething over the clipboard Marcus had made her sign, over the captain's warning, over these 2 children who dared to challenge her authority. And now she saw her opening. A chance to reassert control, to prove these girls were exactly what she'd claimed they were, problems who didn't belong in first class. She stormed down the aisle, her face flushed with vindictive satisfaction. This is exactly what I was talking about. Her voice carried through the cabin, intentionally loud. This is why some people don't belong in first class. Can't even handle a simple beverage without making a mess everywhere. Zuri flinched like she'd been slapped. The joy that had been slowly returning to her face evaporated, replaced by shame and fresh tears. It was turbulence, Amara said firmly, standing up to put herself between Patricia and her sister. The plane shook. It could have happened to anyone. But it happened to her, Patricia sneered, gesturing at Zuri with contempt. Maybe if she'd been raised with some class, she'd know how to conduct herself properly. But I suppose we can't all be taught manners. The insult was layered, vicious. Not just about spilled juice. About upbringing. About worth. About the old, ugly lie that some people were inherently less refined, less deserving, less civilized, based on nothing but the color of their skin. Have you ever watched someone use a child's innocent mistake as an excuse to unleash their bigotry? Seen an adult bully a 9-year-old to make themselves feel powerful? That's what Patricia was doing. And every passenger in first class was watching it happen. "Ma'am, that's completely inappropriate," the woman from 3B said, standing up. "She's 9 years old and the turbulence caused the spill. Your behavior is disgusting." "My behavior?" Patricia whirled on her. "I'm trying to maintain standards on this aircraft. Standards that apparently don't matter anymore if we're just letting anyone into premium cabins." "Anyone?" A black man in 1C stood now, his voice dangerously calm. "Say what you mean. Stop hiding behind code words. You mean black people. You mean these children don't belong here because they're black." Patricia's face went crimson. "I never said that." "You didn't have to," an elderly white woman in row 4 spoke up, her voice quavering but determined. "I'm 78 years old. I grew up in the segregated South. I know exactly what you're saying and exactly what you mean. And I'm ashamed to share this cabin with someone like you." More passengers joined in. A chorus of voices defending the girls, condemning Patricia, refusing to let discrimination hide behind professional language. Patricia was losing it. Her carefully constructed facade of authority was crumbling, and everyone could see the ugliness beneath. "You're all being manipulated," she shouted. "Can't you see what they're doing? Playing the victim, making everything about race when really they're just entitled brats who—" "Enough!" Marcus materialized at Patricia's side, his voice sharp with command. "Patricia, the captain has ordered you to return to the galley immediately. You're not to interact with passengers for the remainder of this flight." "I'm the senior flight attendant on this aircraft," Patricia hissed. "You don't give me orders." "The captain does. And he just did." "Now." Patricia looked around the cabin, seeing condemnation on every face, phone still recording her meltdown, her career imploding in real time. Desperation made her reckless. "Fine," she spat. "But first, I'm upgrading other passengers to these seats. These girls can move to economy where they should have been from the start." She reached for Amara's shoulder, fingers curling to pull her out of the seat. That's when Amara held up the tablet, screen facing Patricia, showing the recording that had been running for hours. Every word, every sneer, every moment of discrimination is captured in crystal clear video. "Touch me," Amara said quietly, "and that's assault of a minor on camera. Is that really how you want this to end?" Patricia froze, her hands suspended in midair, finally understanding the trap she'd walked into. The tablet, the recording, the witnesses, the text message that had been sent. Everything had been documented, time-stamped, and saved. "You've been recording," Patricia whispered, the color draining from her face. "For my school project," Amara said, her voice steady despite her hammering heart. "Document your first solo flight," they said. "Show what you learned." "I learned a lot today, Ms. Hendricks. I learned that racism is alive and well. I learned that some adults abuse their power. And I learned that staying silent doesn't protect you. It just protects the people hurting you." Patricia backed away like the tablet was radioactive. Marcus gently took her arm, guiding her toward the galley, murmuring something about corporate investigations and legal consequences. In the cockpit, Captain Stevens was on a secure line with Transcontinental Airways Emergency Response Team, detailing everything that had happened, knowing this would dominate news cycles, spark lawsuits, and trigger federal investigations. And at LAX, Judge Eleanor Morrison sat in her car in the arrivals area, her phone pressed to her ear, listening as Robert Chen, chairman of the board, her old friend, her granddaughter's godfather, outlined exactly what would happen the moment Flight 2847 touched down. "Airport police will be waiting," Robert said, his voice cold with fury. "Patricia Hendricks will be escorted off the aircraft in handcuffs if she resists. The entire crew will be suspended pending investigation. And Eleanor? I'm personally meeting that plane. I need to hug those babies and tell them how sorry I am that this happened on my airline." Back on the plane, Patricia stood in the galley, shaking, realizing too late that she'd targeted children with connections she couldn't have imagined, with documentation she couldn't deny, with advocates she couldn't silence. The plane began its descent toward Los Angeles. 30 minutes until landing. 30 minutes until Patricia faced consequences she'd spent 16 years avoiding. 30 minutes until Amara and Zuri learned that speaking up, standing up, refusing to accept discrimination as normal, all of it mattered. All of it had power. And that power was about to change everything. The wheels touched down at LAX with a gentle bump. Through the windows, Amara could see ground crew and vehicles, but also something unusual, several black SUVs with official markings, airport security vehicles, and what looked like police cars positioned near their gate. Captain Stevens' voice came over the intercom, measured but tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We have officials who will be boarding the aircraft before general deplaning begins. This is not a security threat. We apologize for any inconvenience." Passengers murmured, looking around, many glancing toward Amara and Zuri, putting pieces together. As the plane taxied to the gate, Patricia emerged from the galley one final time. Her uniform was wrinkled now, her makeup smudged, her carefully constructed professionalism completely shattered. She approached the girls' row, and Marcus immediately stepped between them. "Don't," he warned quietly. But Patricia wasn't coming to attack. She was coming to plead. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "Please don't share that recording. I have a family. I have bills. I need this job. I made a mistake, okay? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just delete it. Please." Amara looked at this woman who'd called her entitled, who'd told her she didn't belong, who'd made her baby sister cry, who'd tried to physically remove them from seats their parents had sacrificed to buy. This woman, who was sorry only because she'd been caught, only because there was evidence, only because consequences were finally coming. "You had 16 years to be sorry," Amara said quietly. "How many other people did you treat like this? How many other kids did you make cry? How many complaints did you get that just disappeared because nobody could prove it?" Patricia's face crumpled. "I never meant. I'm not a bad person. I just sometimes certain passengers seem like they're trying to take advantage." "Certain passengers," the woman from 3B repeated, standing. "Say it. Certain black passengers. That's what you mean. Own it. Stop hiding behind euphemisms and own your racism." The plane door opened. Airport police entered first, followed by airline security, then a silver-haired man in an expensive suit who moved with authority. Robert Chen, chairman of the board of Transcontinental Airways, swept the cabin with sharp eyes before they landed on Amara and Zuri. His expression softened immediately. "There are my girls," he said, his voice gentle as he approached their row. He knelt beside them, and Zuri burst into fresh tears, reaching for him. "Uncle Robert," she sobbed, using the honorary title she'd called him since she was a baby. "She was so mean to us." Robert held her, his jaw clenched tight with fury, but his voice stayed soft for the girls. "I know, sweetheart. I know. And I'm so sorry. This should never have happened. Not on my airline. Not to my goddaughters. Not to anyone." He looked up at Patricia, who'd gone white as a sheet. "Miss Hendricks, you're terminated effective immediately. Airport police will escort you off this aircraft. You'll be issued a permanent ban from all Transcontinental Airways flights. And if these girls' family decides to press charges, which they have every right to do, the airline will not be providing legal support. You're on your own." Patricia swayed on her feet. "Mr. Chen, please, I can explain." "Explain what?" His voice went cold. "Explain the 17 previous complaints against you that somehow never made it to my desk? Explain the passengers who stopped flying with us because of how you treated them? Explain why you thought it was acceptable to terrorize children." He stood, his full height and authority radiating controlled fury. "You didn't just violate our policies. You violated basic human decency. You're done." Airport police stepped forward, one officer on each side of Patricia. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." "I didn't do anything illegal." Patricia's voice rose to a shriek. "I was doing my job." "Actually," one officer said, pulling out handcuffs, assault of a minor, which includes threatening physical contact, is illegal. Discrimination against minors in interstate travel is a federal offense. And creating a hostile environment on an aircraft can be prosecuted under several statutes. So yes, ma'am, you did do something illegal. Several things, actually. The handcuffs clicked shut around Patricia's wrists. The sound echoed through the silent cabin like a gavel striking. As police led her down the aisle, Patricia looked back at Amara one final time. No longer arrogant. No longer powerful. Just a woman facing the consequences of hatred she'd thought she could hide forever. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Amara held her tablet close, the recording that had captured everything, the evidence that had finally brought justice. "You're sorry you got caught," she said. "That's not the same thing." Patricia disappeared down the jetway, her career over, her future uncertain, her name about to become synonymous with discrimination in airline industry investigations that would last for months. Robert turned to Captain Stevens, who'd emerged from the cockpit. "Captain, I need you to write a full incident report. Include everything you heard and observed. Be thorough. This is going to trial, and I want documentation that leaves no room for doubt." "Yes, sir," Captain Stevens said. Then he approached Amara and Zuri, crouching down like Robert had. "Girls, I'm sorry I didn't intervene sooner. I should have shut this down the moment it started. You deserved better from all of us." Amara squeezed Zuri's hand. Her little sister had stopped crying, exhaustion taking over. "Thank you for believing us," Amara said simply. As they prepared to deplane, passengers approached one by one. The woman from 3B handed Amara her business card. She was a civil rights attorney who wanted to help with any lawsuits. The elderly woman from row 4 hugged them both, tears streaming down her weathered face. The black man from 1C told them they were braver than most adults he knew. Every person who'd recorded the incident had already sent their videos to Robert's legal team. Evidence from multiple angles. Testimony from dozens of witnesses. An airtight case. And then they stepped into the terminal, and there she was. Grandma Eleanor. 72 years old, 5 feet tall, with silver hair and eyes that could reduce lawyers to stammering messes when she'd sat on the federal bench. Now those eyes filled with tears as her granddaughters ran to her. "My babies," she whispered, holding them both. "My brave, beautiful babies." Behind her stood a crowd of reporters, cameras, and news crews who'd gotten wind of the story. But Robert's security team held them back, giving the family privacy for their reunion. "Did we do the right thing, Grandma?" Amara asked, suddenly uncertain. Patricia lost her job. Her kids, she said she has kids. Eleanor cupped Amara's face gently. "Baby, her children will suffer because of the choices she made. Not because of the choices you made. You didn't put hatred in her heart. You didn't make her treat you with cruelty. All you did was refuse to accept that cruelty as normal. And that, my darling girl, is always the right thing." Zuri looked up at her grandmother. "Are we in trouble?" "Trouble?" Eleanor laughed, but there were tears in it. "Baby, you're heroes. You stood up for yourselves when adults failed you. You documented injustice when others looked away. You're exactly what your mama and daddy raised you to be." Robert approached with his phone. "Eleanor, I have James and Sarah on video call. They want to see their girls." The screen filled with their parents' faces. Mama in her Air Force uniform, Daddy in his Army fatigues, both calling from classified locations half a world away, both with tears streaming down their faces. "Hi, Daddy," Zuri said, her voice small. "Hi, Mama. We made it to Grandma's house." And watching their parents cry with pride and rage and relief, Amara finally let herself break down. She'd been strong for Zuri. Strong for the passengers. Strong on that recording. But now, safe with family, she could finally be 12 years old and scared and hurt and needing her parents. "We love you so much," her mother said through tears. "You were so brave. Both of you. So brave." Her father's jaw was clenched. "That woman is lucky she's in police custody. Because if I could get on a plane right now." "James," Grandma Eleanor said gently, "let the law handle it. That's what I taught you. We fight with justice, not with fists." He nodded, but the fury didn't leave his eyes. As they gathered their luggage, as Robert's team guided them past the media circus, as Grandma Eleanor drove them toward her house in the hills, Amara held the tablet close. The recording would be reviewed by lawyers, federal investigators, civil rights organizations, and eventually, the court of public opinion. Patricia Hendricks' 16-year career had ended in handcuffs. But this story was just beginning. The news broke within hours. By dinner time, Amara's recording was trending worldwide. #transcontinental discrimination dominated social media. News outlets played edited clips, enough to show Patricia's cruelty without exposing the full faces of the minor children involved. But the damage to Patricia Hendricks was complete and public. Her name, her face, her entire employment history became public record within 24 hours. Investigative journalists dug deep, finding those 17 previous complaints that had mysteriously disappeared. Passengers from years past came forward with their own stories, a pattern of discrimination so clear, so documented, that even her most sympathetic defenders had to admit the truth. She wasn't having one bad day. This was who she'd always been. The other flight attendants who'd stood by and watched, who'd laughed at Patricia's jokes about certain passengers, who'd failed to report her behavior, who'd been complicit through silence, faced their own reckonings. Transcontinental Airways suspended the entire first-class crew from Flight 2847 pending investigation. Marcus Chen, the flight attendant who'd finally stood up for the girls, was the only one immediately cleared and commended for his intervention. Within a week, federal investigators from the Department of Transportation announced a formal inquiry into discrimination practices across the airline industry. Transcontinental Airways stock dropped 12%. Their CEO appeared on national television, apologizing profusely, announcing immediate policy changes, and promising this would never happen again. But the real consequences played out in Patricia's life with devastating speed. She was fired, blacklisted from airline employment industry-wide. Her face became synonymous with bigotry, her name a cautionary tale. Job applications went unanswered. Friends stopped calling. Her social media accounts, before she could delete them, were screenshotted and archived, revealing years of coded racist language that she'd thought was subtle enough to hide behind. The federal charges moved forward: assault of a minor, discrimination in interstate travel, creating a hostile environment on an aircraft. She faced potential prison time and mandatory fines that would bankrupt her. Have you ever wondered what real accountability looks like? Not just an apology or sensitivity training, but actual consequences that match the harm caused? That's what Patricia faced. Tell us in the comments if you think the punishment fits the crime. Meanwhile, at Grandma Eleanor's house in the hills overlooking Los Angeles, Amara and Zuri were processing their new reality. They'd become symbols overnight, representations of courage, of standing up to injustice, of refusing to be silenced. Their school project recording had become evidence in multiple lawsuits. Civil rights organizations wanted them to speak at conferences. News outlets requested interviews. Their parents' commanding officers called personally to express pride and support. But they were still just kids who wanted to swim in Grandma's pool and eat peach cobbler and forget about flight attendants and discrimination and the weight of being someone's lesson. Do you think she learned anything? Zuri asked one evening, curled up on the couch with her stuffed elephant. Patricia, do you think she understands now why what she did was wrong? Amara considered the question carefully. I think she understands she got caught. Whether she understands why it was wrong, I don't know. Some people never do. Eleanor sat between her granddaughters, an arm around each. What matters is what you two learned. That your voices have power. That documentation matters. That standing up is hard but necessary. Patricia's education is her own responsibility. Yours is complete. Robert Chen visited regularly, bringing gifts and apologies and updates on the airline's transformation. New training programs. Independent oversight committees. A passenger bill of rights is prominently displayed at every gate. Changes that would affect millions of travelers, all sparked by two girls who refused to accept discrimination as normal. The lawsuit settled quietly but substantially. The monetary compensation would fund both girls' college educations completely. But more importantly, Transcontinental Airways agreed to sweeping reforms, mandatory transparency in complaint handling, and annual audits by civil rights organizations. Patricia Hendricks pleaded guilty to reduced charges to avoid trial. She received probation, community service, and a permanent record that would follow her forever. Her attorney released a statement saying she was deeply remorseful and committed to personal growth. Amara read the statement on her tablet and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just tired of accepting that some people only learned when forced, and even then, maybe not at all. But what happened next would determine whether this moment became a lasting change or just another viral story people forgot. Because Patricia wasn't the only one. She was just the one who got caught. 3 weeks into their summer stay, Amara sat at Grandma Eleanor's kitchen table, working on the final edit of her school project. The recording that had sparked a movement now needed to become a presentation she could actually show to her 7th grade class. She'd watched the footage dozens of times now, and each viewing hurt less but taught more. She could see the exact moment Patricia decided they were problems. Could pinpoint when fear turned to determination on her own young face. Could hear Zuri's quiet sobs that she tried so hard to hide. It's hard to watch, isn't it? Eleanor sat down beside her with 2 glasses of lemonade. Seeing yourself in pain, even when you know it ends okay. I keep thinking about what you said, Amara replied softly. About how Patricia's not the only one. How many other kids are going through this right now, on planes or in stores or at school, and nobody's recording it. Nobody believes them. Eleanor's eyes grew distant, remembering. When I was about your age, maybe a year older, I tried to check out books from the public library. The white librarian told me those books were for serious readers and suggested I try the colored library across town. I was reading at college level. But she looked at my skin and decided I wasn't worthy of the books in her library. What did you do? I went to the colored library. Checked out even harder books. Read everything I could get my hands on. And I promised myself that someday, I'd have power to make sure other little girls didn't face what I faced. She smiled sadly. Decades later, as a federal judge, I'd like to think I kept that promise. But then I watch what happened to you and Zuri, and I realize how much work is still left. Zuri wandered in from the pool, wrapped in a towel, her hair wet and free of its usual braids. She'd been quieter since the flight, quicker to tears, slower to trust strangers. The sparkle that had defined her was dimmed, and that broke Amara's heart more than anything Patricia had said to her personally. Grandma, why do people hate us? Zuri asked suddenly, climbing into Eleanor's lap despite being too big for it. We didn't do anything to them. Eleanor held her youngest granddaughter close, tears slipping down her weathered cheeks. Baby, they don't hate you. They hate what you represent. They hate that the world is changing, that spaces they thought belonged only to them now belong to everyone. They hate their own fear and insecurity, and they take it out on people who remind them that they're not as special as they thought they were. That's stupid, Zuri said. Yes, it is. But stupid doesn't mean harmless. Stupidity with power is dangerous. That's why what you and your sister did matters so much. Amara saved her project file and turned to face her grandmother fully. I've been thinking about that. About whether it actually mattered. Patricia got fired, but there are thousands of other Patricias out there. The airline changed some policies, but will they actually enforce them? We got money for college, but that doesn't undo the trauma Zuri experienced. So did it really change anything? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. You know what changed? Every flight attendant in America saw what happened to Patricia. They saw that there are consequences now. They saw that children have power, that documentation matters, that the old ways of burying complaints don't work anymore. You created fear in people who need to be afraid. Afraid of losing their jobs if they discriminate, afraid of being exposed, afraid of accountability. Fear isn't the same as change, Amara countered. No, but it's a start. Real change takes generations. Your great-grandmother couldn't vote. Your grandmother had to use separate water fountains. Your mother flew combat missions that my generation of women couldn't. And you? You documented discrimination and brought down an entire system of complaint suppression. Each generation pushes further. That's how it works. Amara thought about her parents, serving overseas, fighting for a country that still struggled to see them as fully equal. Thought about Grandma Eleanor, breaking barriers in courtrooms while facing judges who didn't think women, especially black women, belonged on the bench. Thought about all the ancestors whose names she didn't know, who'd survived worse and pushed forward anyway. I want to do something with the recording, Amara said suddenly. Not just show it to my class. Something bigger. I want to create a program where kids learn how to document discrimination, how to speak up safely, and how to gather evidence. The only reason we won is that I happen to be recording for a school project. What about all the kids who aren't? Eleanor's smile was proud and sad all at once. You're 12 years old and you're already thinking like an advocate. Like someone who takes personal pain and transforms it into protection for others. Someone taught me that, Amara said, squeezing her grandmother's hand. Over the next few weeks, with Eleanor's legal guidance and Robert Chen's financial backing, the idea took shape. The Morrison Sisters Youth Advocacy Project, teaching children how to recognize discrimination, document it safely, and report it effectively. Partnering with schools, civil rights organizations, and airlines to create systems where children's voices were heard and believed. Zuri surprised everyone by wanting to be involved. I don't want other kids to feel like I felt, she said, her 9-year-old voice firm with determination. Scared and small and like nobody cared. They held their first workshop at a community center in South Los Angeles. 50 kids showed up, Black, Latino, Asian, white kids whose parents wanted them to be allies. Amara and Zuri told their story, showed carefully edited portions of the recording, and taught practical skills about when and how to document discrimination. The local news covered it. Then the national news. Then international outlets. 2 girls who'd been victimized were now educators, advocates, warriors in a fight they hadn't chosen but refused to abandon. Their parents video called in from overseas, pride and pain mixing in their faces. They'd raised their daughters to be brave, but they'd hoped that bravery wouldn't be necessary. They'd wanted their girls to have easier lives than they'd had. But easy wasn't the same as meaningful. And what Amara and Zuri were building from the ashes of their trauma was deeply, powerfully meaningful. You know what I learned? Amara said during one workshop, looking out at dozens of young faces hanging on her every word. I learned that silence protects the people hurting you, not you. I learned that adults don't always do the right thing, so sometimes kids have to. And I learned that one person speaking up can make other people brave enough to speak up too. A young black boy raised his hand. But what if speaking up makes things worse? What if you get in trouble? Sometimes you do, Amara admitted. Sometimes standing up for yourself has consequences. But staying quiet also has consequences, just different ones. You have to decide which consequences you can live with. The summer that was supposed to be about swimming and movies and peach cobbler had become about healing and advocacy and transformation. The girls video called their parents almost daily, processing trauma, seeking guidance, and sharing victories. I'm so proud of you, their mother said during one call, her voice thick with emotion. But I'm also so angry that you had to go through this. That the world forced you to grow up faster than you should have. We're okay, Mama, Amara assured her. We're sad sometimes. Zuri still has nightmares. But we're okay. And we're making sure other kids will be okay too. That was the work. Not just surviving discrimination, but using survival as a foundation for change. Not just documenting injustice, but creating systems so the next documentation would be believed and acted upon faster. Patricia Hendricks had wanted to make 2 black girls feel small. Instead, she'd created 2 young advocates who were changing an entire industry's approach to discrimination. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. But as Amara finished her school project, adding a final section about turning pain into purpose, she realized something profound. Patricia had given them a terrible gift. She'd shown them exactly what needed fixing, exactly where the systems failed, exactly how discrimination operated in plain sight while people pretended not to see. And in showing them that, she'd accidentally armed them with the knowledge and motivation to fight back. Sometimes, Amara thought, your enemies teach you more than your friends. You just have to be brave enough to learn the lesson. 6 months after that fateful flight, Amara and Zuri stood on a stage at the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. They'd been invited to speak at a youth conference about discrimination in public spaces. Behind them, a screen displayed statistics about complaints filed versus complaints addressed, showing the massive gap the airline industry was finally beginning to close. "People ask us if we're angry," Amara said into the microphone, her voice steady and strong. "If we hate Patricia Hendricks. If we hadn't wished we'd never gotten on that plane." Zuri stepped forward, no longer the frightened 9-year-old from that flight, but a 10-year-old who'd found her voice. "I don't hate her. I feel sorry for her. She spent 16 years being mean to people and thought she'd never face consequences. That's a sad way to live. But are we angry?" Amara continued. "Yes. We're angry that it took a viral video for anyone to care. We're angry that 17 other people complained about Patricia, and nothing happened. We're angry that kids all over the world face this kind of treatment every single day, and most of them don't have tablets recording, don't have grandmothers who are federal judges, don't have godfathers who run airlines." The audience, filled with teenagers and young adults who'd experienced their own discrimination, nodded in recognition. "So we turned that anger into action," Amara said. "The Morrison Sisters Youth Advocacy Project has trained over 5,000 kids in 30 states. We've helped document discrimination cases that led to real consequences. We've partnered with airlines, schools, and businesses to create better reporting systems. And we've shown that children's voices matter." Their parents, finally home from deployment, sat in the front row. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison in his dress uniform, Major Dr. Sarah Morrison in hers, both with tears of pride streaming down their faces. They'd fought for their country. Their daughters were fighting for its soul. Grandma Eleanor sat beside them, her hand in Robert Chen's, 2 old friends who'd turned personal pain into systemic change, watching the next generation carry the torch forward. As Amara and Zuri finished their speech, as the audience rose in a standing ovation, as flash photography captured the moment for tomorrow's headlines, the girls held hands and squeezed 3 times. Their secret code learned from their parents. "I love you." They'd survived. They'd fought back. They'd won. But more importantly, they'd made sure the next child wouldn't have to fight as hard. Thank you for watching Amara and Zuri Morrison's story. If you believe in fairness and equality, if you think no child should ever be told they don't belong in a seat their family paid for, if you believe that accountability matters more than protecting people who abuse their power, hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the Hyper Racism channel for more stories that expose discrimination and celebrate the courage to fight back. What would you have done in Amara's shoes? Would you have stayed quiet to avoid confrontation, or found your voice and documented everything? Would you have had the courage to show that recording, knowing it might make you a target? Tell us in the comments. Do you think racial discrimination and prejudice can truly end? What concrete steps do you believe need to happen to curb it? Is serving justice to individuals like Patricia Hendricks enough, or do we need deeper systemic changes in how complaints are handled, how employees are trained, and how children are taught to recognize and report discrimination? Tell us your honest opinion, because these conversations are how change begins. And if you want racism to become a thing of the past in our country and world at large, if you want to be like Amara and Zuri Morrison, turning pain into purpose, trauma into teaching, victimization into advocacy, then share this video and subscribe to this channel. Together, we can create a world where no child has to document their own discrimination just to be believed. Together, we can build systems that protect victims instead of perpetrators. Together, we can make sure that the next Patricia Hendricks knows, before she opens her mouth, that there will be consequences. Amara Morrison was 12 years old when she learned that her voice had power. Zuri Morrison was 9 when she learned that her tears could spark change. They didn't ask to be activists. They just wanted to visit their grandmother. But sometimes the battles we don't choose become the ones that define us. The question is, when your moment comes, when you witness injustice or experience it yourself, will you stay silent or will you speak up? Because the next Amara and Zuri are out there right now. Boarding a plane, walking into a store, sitting in a classroom, facing someone who's decided they don't belong. and they're waiting to see if anyone will stand with them. Will it be you?